Last week, Reverend Shannon taught us about the spiritual principle of patience. And she spoke about how when we plant a seed, growth is happening below the soil, below the ground, where we can't see it. And she reminded us that love, too, is patient. And when we are patient, we can see love grow in our lives and in the world. I was driving home from that talk. After that talk, we had a beautiful board meeting. And then that afternoon, I was driving home, and as I pulled up to my house, I saw my wonderful husband, Michael, was in the front yard throwing the ball for the dog. How many hours a day do you think that dog just chases a tennis ball? It's his joy. And gardening, because that's what he does while the dog is chasing. Husband is digging in the garden. And I was thinking about Reverend Shannon's talk. I was thinking about those seeds that we plant and how it takes patience to watch them bloom. And I was thinking about my own journey with patience and how far I have come and how very far I still have to go. And I see my husband, I pull up, I'm a little tired, and I see my husband, and he's in the lily garden. And I want to talk today about our lilies. Our lilies are really special to us, and we're going to talk about why here in a minute. But before we talk about the lilies, there's something that I want to name. There is a lot of pain in the field right now. There's a lot of grief in the field. There's been a lot of loss and a lot of change, a lot of life-altering change. And I think it's really important for us to name that so we can presence it without diminishing it and without catastrophizing it, just naming it and allowing it to be what it is. And so today, we're not going to talk about the grief. We do that sometimes. That's not what today is about. Today, we're going to talk about what lives on. We're going to talk about what we can learn and how we can celebrate life even in the face of loss. We're going to talk about how do we nourish ourselves and how do we work with life to leave a legacy of love. So here's the story of my lilies. Some of you know this story because Chris was a founding member of this community. And the lilies that we have at our house are some of Chris's lilies. We have a lily garden here outside of the community hall. There, in that corner of the building. We have some of Chris's lilies in there. So Chris was a beautiful man that I met over 20 years ago. We worked together. And he was married to our previous music minister, our beloved David. And he was father to Joe. And he was a beloved figure around here, an important member of our choir. And Chris was one of the most encouraging human beings I ever met, even after the devastating diagnosis of ALS. He continued to encourage and to give and to love. So Chris was a master gardener who loved lilies. And a few years after his transition, David decided it was time to sell their home. And he called those of us who love Chris and said, come get some of Chris's lilies if you'd like some for your garden. So my beloved gardening husband trotted over to David and Chris's house, and he got, he probably got a dozen plants, but we only kept about 6 of those plants. He gave them away to other people as well. And so we put our half a dozen plants in the ground and gave some away, and we put some here. Anybody in here have some of Chris's lilies? Yeah, one. So there are Chris's lilies all over the town by now because we have moved twice since then. And every time we move, we leave some of Chris's lilies, and some of Chris's lilies come with us They came with us to our last house, and they have come with us to this house. Oh. And it makes me wonder how many more places in the world have been made more beautiful because of this man's soul. How many places are more beautiful because Chris gave of himself? And Chris's lilies keep giving to us long after his life on this plane. Every time I see a lily, I think about his loving smile. Every time I see a lily, I think about his mischievous laugh and how he just loved all of us. Chris's lilies were a gift that we received with gratitude and with love, and this gift keeps returning to us every year. And in fact, they're multiplying themselves. How many lily plants do you think we have in our current house alone? At least 20, maybe more. And that doesn't count the ones that we've left in other places and given away, right? In fact, there's a picture. John, do you have a picture? That's just like a tiny, this is like yesterday I went out with my cell phone and snapped a picture. These are my favorite of Chris's lilies that we have. We have several different varieties of Chris's lilies, but I love these maroony pink darlings that are in bloom right now. So part of the reason why we have lilies all over our house is because of Chris and the legacy of beauty that he left behind. But another part of the reason that we have lilies all over our house is because, thank God, I married a gardener. And he takes good care of them, you know? He works with nature. He works with the nature of the lilies themselves. And he manages to co-create something beautiful in the world. In the spring, he makes sure that the soil has the nutrients that it needs. In the summer, he makes sure that that they have the water that they need. And then in the late summer, he cuts them back to where he leaves the parts of the plant that still serve the plant, and he lets everything else go. In the winter, he lets them rest, and he rests too, sort of. He's a doer. But you see, this activity of loving care that happens means that that gift that we receive, we put a little bit of energy into, and then we receive that gift again and again and again. And over all of this, I feel Chris like a blossoming angel whistling a song, hanging over it, you know? And that energy of love never goes away. We never lose it. So there are many, many things I love about this process with the lilies. One of them is that we get to remember Chris. And I love that. I love that we get to remember this man that we love dearly. Love that we get to celebrate his life. And that it doesn't matter which side of the veil he's on, that love is never wasted, that love still continues. I love that about the lilies. The lilies remind me that love lives on. It reminds me that love isn't wasted, it's transformed. It's different now. It's different than the love we shared when he was on this side of life, you know? And that's okay. But what I really love about Chris's lilies is that it reminds me that when we care for what we have been given, what we've been given serves us. And it becomes this cycle of life, this circulation of good that is never ending. That love that provides, that Lori Jones just taught us about in such a beautiful song, that love that provides, we receive it, and then we amplify it, and then we send it back out. That's the activity of life that we're going to talk about today. So thinking about how Michael nourishes his garden made me wonder, does anybody take care of me that way? Do I take care of me that way? Could I possibly love and nurture myself so completely that I create a safe space for me to grow and to bloom and to rest? Can you nourish yourself so completely that you create a safe space to grow and to bloom and to rest? Today's talk is called Soul Food. Soul food. Because we're digging into, see what I did there? Digging it. Thank you, Karen. We are digging into the things that help us to create this space, that space to nourish our souls and our bodies so completely that the nourishment itself returns to us. What do I mean by that? The way that Michael takes care of the lilies creates a space for them to give back. It's in the way he shows up, day in and day out. It's in the way that he gives the garden his attention. It's in the way he brings his knowledge about gardening and his soul that loves to nurture things. He gives it time. He gives it love. And this taught me something about how we nourish. Show up. Pay attention. Give it your gifts. And then give it love. And we're going to dig into those 4 things. Show up, pay attention, give it your gifts, and give it some love. And then watch how this cycle feeds you. So let's dig into that a little bit. When we do these 4 things, when we do them all together, when we nourish the world, we are nourished in return. So showing up. There's a fine balance between knowing when it's time to show up for yourself and when it's time to show up for the world. Sometimes showing up starts here. Sometimes showing up means retreating a little bit, and that's okay, because you're showing up for yourself. So I want to be really clear about what showing up is. Showing up doesn't mean you have to be here all the time. You don't. That's not what showing up is. Showing up is aligning with your authentic truth and being that wherever you are. Showing up as you wherever you are, whether that's in a space with yourself or whether that's in a space with other people. But here's the thing about showing up. There is a thing that I have learned, that when I show up, I find that God has already shown up. And there's a comfort in that for me, that God is already in the room. And all I have to do is show up there, and the space has already been made. There was a Christian comedic writer named Mike Yaconelli, and he said, "I'm unfinished. I'm unfixed." And the reality is that that's where God meets me. It's in the mess of my life, in the unfixedness. It's in the unfixedness. It's in the unfinishedness. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about how God is the infinite circle and we are the finite circle. And God is the wholeness, the infinite wholeness, and so we are whole, right? And we talked about that place where we meet Spirit. But guess what? Spirit doesn't only meet us when we are remembering our perfection. Praise God. Because God is already there. God is already showing up. The wholeness of God meets us everywhere we are. God shows up. But the thing about showing up is that when Michael shows up in his garden, not only is God already there in the garden, but Michael is bringing God to the garden. Michael brings love to the garden. Michael brings the willingness to be a co-creator with that spirit, that divinity. So God shows up, but when Michael shows up, it amplifies the good, it amplifies the God. When Donna shows up at the easel to paint, right? She's replicating the divine nature of creativity in her workshop. When Rand shows up to do sound, he's replicating. When he shows up, he is replicating the divine nature of technical genius, because that's what it takes to amplify this. It's a whole situation. When Rand shows up, he's amplifying the nature of divinity in this room. When Lori Jones shows up, did you see it? I saw it. I saw God show up right here on this platform. God showed up because Lori showed up. And that's how it works. You know, divinity's already there, but then when we show up, it's magnified, it's amplified, and it's glorious. When you show up, what aspect of the divine is showing up to? Maybe it's love, maybe it's kindness. Maybe you're a beautiful painter like Donna or a beautiful singer like Lori Jones. Maybe you know how to teach college students. Maybe you know how to run a camera and sing like an angel, Shayla Bailey. When you show up, what are you amplifying? What are you bringing to the party? So number one, show up. Number two is paying attention. Mary Oliver wrote, to pay attention, this is our endless and proper work. To pay attention is our endless and proper work. Whatever you want to nurture, there is a cost, and it's your attention. We were watching the Olympic trials this week. I love the Olympics. Some of y'all are sport ball people, and some of y'all are like, what are other sports? I don't know. I'm Olympics people. I get so excited for the Olympics. So we were watching Olympic trials, go Team USA, and I heard there was a guy who was an announcer. We were watching track and field, and there was a guy who was an announcer who was a former athlete, and he said, you know, there's a price that you pay, and it's attention, and it's the least expensive thing that you will ever pay, and it's the most important. And I thought, well, my golly, isn't that true? Attention is the lowest price you're going to pay, but it's the most important thing. And I agree with that because we know that what we pay attention to grows. We know that. We know that when we are attending to our self-care, everything gets better. We know that if we want to succeed at something, we have to attend to it. The word... The Latin root of attention comes from attendere, which means to extend the mind or energies to. So when we pay attention, there's a reaching out action of it. There's an extending of our energies. And what we know about energy is that there has to be an equal exchange. And so when we pay attention, something else is given energy, and that energy gets spent somewhere else. That didn't make any sense at all. Let me try again. The energies must always be in balance. So we have to be open to give, but we also have to be open to receive. Both things have to be true. Otherwise, we're out of balance. When we extend our energy out, we have to be willing to accept energy back. And it might show up in the same way that we gave it. It might show up in a different form. So we might give our beautiful Colorado people who are gathering today. Hello, beautiful NTCSL Colorado. Our Colorado people were making, they were decorating bags that they were filling with things for people to keep in their cars to give to homeless. Hygiene kits, things like that. And when we do that, when we give, when we put together something with the intention of giving it to someone, right? When we give, the thing that comes back to us is probably not going to be a hygiene kit. And that's okay. The thing that comes back to us might be joy, a greater opportunity to give. You know, the energy exchange that happens isn't a tit for tat. This isn't some kind of transactional relationship. This is spirit. This is the divine happening here. So we open to give and we open to receive. And there's a trust that has to happen in that. A trust that what we receive will be what we need. We're filling someone else's need. And sometimes, it's probably just me. Sometimes we're so blind to our own needs that when that thing comes back to us, we don't even recognize it for the gift that it is. I'm sure that's just me. I'm sure all of you are so in touch with your needs that you have no idea what I'm talking about, and I celebrate that for you. I celebrate that for you. I'm not there yet. I still have some work to do. So, if you're feeling depleted right now, I'm going to invite you to look at two things. I'm going to invite you to see where you're giving and how you're receiving. Are you open? Do you trust that what is coming back to you is what you need? How do we know that what the experience we're having is the experience we need? Because that's the experience we're having. Right? Can we trust that? That's hard sometimes. That's hard. So make sure that you're paying attention to what you're extending and what you're receiving, so you're not overextending and getting out of balance, right? And then I'm going to invite you to, if you're feeling overextended, to pay attention, pay careful attention to your self-care. What really fills you up? What really nourishes you? Make it happen. Okay, showing up, paying attention. Number 3, expressing your unique gifts. I have a confession, and Terry Christopher, I hope you still love me after this confession. I can't garden. I'm a terrible gardener. I am. I'm awful. I used to try and garden with my husband. He would go through a huge garden bed and he would weed, and then he would compost, and then he would go back inside for lunch, and I would be sitting on the ground. I don't know if the camera can track me here, with tweezers, plucking out all of the little things that were left behind. It's hell. It's hell to garden as Shelley Walker. All I could see was like that it wasn't what I had in my head. I can look at any of your gardens and appreciate it unconditionally, no matter what state it's in. I love messy gardens. I love ornate gardens. I love rigid, like English gardens. You name it, I love it. But if it's my garden, all I see are the things that are wrong and all of the weeding that needs to get done, and I get overwhelmed and I walk away. Gardening does not feed my soul. It stresses me out to no end. To no end. I feel like I just had like a true confession, and I'm not sure how I feel about myself right now. Okay, here's the thing though. I can't garden. Now we all know that. But I can write a talk. I can teach a class. I can make a mean salad with all those lettuce and tomatoes that he grows. I can raise compassionate children who sing like birds. You know? The thing is that we don't all have to be gardeners. God has given us gardeners, and we love them. But we also need other gifts. And the thing for us to remember is that we each get to show up with our unique gifts. There's an energy of life that is always attempting to express. To press out is what express means. right? So it's a thing that is yearning to happen from you out into the world. There's this activity of life that is yearning to happen in you. And when you acquiesce, when you say yes, what happens is you create a current, a flow. This expression that is happening creates a riptide, if you will. And this current can either pull you forward into your next greater yet to be, or you can fight the current and get exhausted. It's exhausting to fight the current of your life. So in this desire to express whatever your unique gifts are, and you all have them, and I hope you all know what they are. If you don't, we'll talk. I have some ideas for most of you, although there's a few of you I don't know. I'd love to learn about your gifts. It's not just about being willing to paint, being willing to be vulnerable and stand up here and sing. It's not just about being willing to give the gifts. It's about being willing to surrender to the flow that happens when we do. And this is something I feel like we don't talk about that much. I feel like we don't really talk about the surrender aspect of it, the trust aspect of it. Do you know in all these pages I never wrote the word trust? But it keeps coming up again and again because until we trust the process, we're fighting the process. Trust is so important. So expressing your unique gifts means letting love be love in you, letting light be light in you, being willing to trust and surrender to the idea that you have something to give because you do, and being willing to allow that current to pull you forward. Allow yourself to express in your unique way, because that's why you were put here now in these very interesting times. So it was show up, pay attention, express your unique gift. And the last thing that I noticed in the way Michael takes care of his garden is that he gives it love. And because of all of that love that he gives it, there's a cycle of circulation of good that happens. He gives love, he receives beauty. He gives love, he receives grace. He gives love, he receives. As a gardener, when he gardens, he actually gets joy. And there's this symbiotic relationship between dirt and his soul that I don't share, but I celebrate it in you. There's science about this. Right, Terry? There's actual science about this, about how when gardeners put their fingers in the dirt, just the activity of gardening itself changes a gardener's gut biome. It fascinates me. I'm a little jealous. I kind of wish I were a gardener, but I'm clearly not. So when he gives love and he receives beauty, when he gives love and he receives that change in him that brings him joy, right? There's a cycle, there's a circulation that's happening there. There's an equal exchange of energy that is happening. I don't understand the alchemy of how a seed and a soil and a water make a lily. I just don't understand that. I don't understand the science of it. I don't understand the biology of it. I just have a deep appreciation of it. The same thing is true of our relationship with God. I can't see what's happening. I don't understand how it works. I have taken 1,000,000 classes and written a lot of 20-page papers in my master's program. Nobody knows. That's all I've learned. Nobody knows We're all just walking each other home. That's what I have learned in ministerial school so far. Dr. Cece, I hope you're not watching this talk. We don't have to see it to know that it's working. We don't have to see the activity of love to know that love is providing for us. We don't have to see the prayer to feel it working in our life. We don't have to see when we do that trust fall into the divine. We sometimes can't see how life is rearranging itself to meet us, but it is. Isn't it glorious? Isn't it divine? There's a trust in that. The patience that Reverend Shannon was teaching us about last week. And a trust that even though I can't see it, I know it's happening. So this thing that I learned from Michael and the lilies is about the circulation of love. It is about the circulation of grace. And we know how this works in our finances. We know that a gracious giver gives and receives. A gracious giver gives and expects. With a joyful expectancy, they are open to receiving their good, right? Well, the same is true in our relationships. A gracious giver knows how to give love in order to receive love. The same is true in our community. A gracious giver knows how to show up and clean the grounds and receive so much gratitude and experience the joy that comes from having a clean and beautiful home to come home to, right? A gracious giver understands this law of the divine that Michael and Chris understand in the garden. That what we plant grows if we show up, when we give it attention, when we give our gifts to it, and when we let love do its alchemical work, that we don't have to see to believe. We have to believe to receive.